go right to a guest who was just mentioned in the previous segment, Dr. Joe Rigney. He's the fellow of theology at New St. Andrews College, pastor of Christ Church in Moscow, Idaho, author of 8 books. His most recent, The Sin of Empathy. Dr. Joe Rigney. Joe, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great.
Great to talk to you.
Good
what
talk
do
to
you
you
believe
too, yeah.
the intent
Good talk to you
of
too, yeah.
Pride Month is? Why Pride Month, and why did they call it Pride? They chose that word, not us.
Yeah. So Pride Month is basically an attempt at education. In the ancient, so actually in the Bible, there's this concept called paideia. It's a kind of a prominent word that's been used in the classical Christian education movement, and it means something like all of life enculturation. So it's not just classroom education, but it's the when you rise up and when you go to bed and when you walk by the way sort of vision of education. And so that's something that all civilizations attempt to do. All civilizations attempt to enculturate people into a certain way of life, a certain worldview. And Pride Month is a modern American secular paideia. It's an attempt so when you wake up in the morning and when you go to Target and when you watch the Braves game, and everywhere you go, you're going to be catechized into various sexual immorality. So it's designed, the rainbow flag becomes everywhere, and it's designed to provoke questions from children. Mommy, what does the rainbow mean? Just like in ancient Israel, they would set up stones of remembrance or hold Passover festivals, so the kids would ask, why do we do this? What's this all about? And the expected answer in the modern world is, we used to be bigoted. We used to hate people because they were different, and now we let everybody love whoever they want to love. So there's an attempt to have symbols that provoke questions that then lead to answers and stories. And quite frankly, answers and stories about high-handed wickedness against God. So that's what Pride Festival or Pride Month is all about. Why they chose to name it Pride is a bit of a mystery because it does sort of blow up the notion that this is somehow a humble and godly thing, but instead this is a rebellious thing against God and His law.
That's a brilliant answer. Let's relate it back to your book, The Sin of Empathy, because that's where our last guest brought you up. First, he said there's a distortion of the idea of freedom in our country. So we spoke deeper about that. But also this idea of like, oh, well, the oppressed, and so we got to look out for them. So how does your book deal with homosexuality? Yeah,
that's actually a really good connection between the Pride Month and the book is under the what I call the progressive gaze, this idea that everybody has a little progressive sitting on their shoulder evaluating what they do and what they say and what they think. But part of that is that certain groups are designated as official victim groups, the marginalized and the oppressed. And there really is marginalization and oppression in the world. There really is evil that is done to groups of people. But this picks out certain ones, and they get privileges. They get extra rights. We're going to reorganize our entire society around their needs, their desires, their sexual deviance. All of society will be rearranged around them because we're the objects of empathy. So this is one of the ways that our natural human emotion and the spiritual virtue of compassion gets hijacked in the modern world, so that it's not about doing good to people, what's actually good for them, but instead it becomes a power tool in the hands of the sensitive, a power tool in the hands of advocates for supposed oppressed groups who are then able to steer and manipulate whole societies.
So I got 2 questions. So let me tell you this first. I was walking around New York City with all the kids. We did a quick trip, and we were walking somewhere, and there was gay pride flags everywhere. And I was like, what's going on? And I guess I was near the Stonewall, gay bar or whatever, where the Stonewall riots, whatever. So I wasn't around for all that, but they had pictures up of police beating the gays. And that's what you would do, Joe. That's the world you want, is where we're attacking people for their homosexuality. So we have to do the opposite of that, and that is celebrate them for their homosexuality. What's the third way?
Yeah, so I don't want to attack anybody, but I do want it to be the same way that there's certain sins in the world that may not need to be illegal, but do need to be shameful. Okay, and actually, this is a good example of what the way that the gay rights movement has sought to kind of hijack this, because the standard narrative, "Mommy, what does the rainbow mean?" is meant to be answered with something like from Selby Falls to Selma to Stonewall, which is the site of the feminist first wave feminism, and then Selma was the civil rights movement, the March in Selma, and then Stonewall was sort of the next phase of this civil rights revolution, and they're meant to connect the gay revolution, the Pride Month, to the civil rights movement, because they know it's a potent symbol. And what I want is, I want it to work the other way. I want homosexuality, I want sodomy, I want it to be shameful, because it is shameful. God says it's shameful, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to go chase people around in the streets at all. That's absolutely not what we want. Instead, we simply want our public displays of celebration to be for things that are good and right and true, such as marriage, such as traditional marriage, which is the foundation of society, which is the nucleus of every form of social order. Most of our politics ought to be geared towards protecting, preserving, upholding, and in this case, recovering the traditional family, a mom, a dad, in covenant with each other for their entire life, for the bearing and raising of children and the future of civilization. That's what we want, and we want that to be celebrated not just in June, but every month. And we want any assaults or attacks on that, whether it's rampant divorce or homosexuality or other forms of sexual deviancy, we want those to be shameful. We want society to look down on those and not celebrate them in the streets.
Okay. I'm going to throw this your way because you barely touched on it, and you can do a better job on this one than me. So right now, and most people watching this are like, yeah, I agree. Joe, Slater, you guys are spot on. Now I'm going to say something that is going to touch the nerves here. A buddy of mine was at a graduation, and the graduates had a rose, and they would go and they would give it to their mom in the stand. Yeah. Very nice.
Yeah.
But some kids had two roses. And my friend thought that this was for the two moms, the lesbian couple. But it wasn't. Yeah. It was for the mom and the stepmom. And he said most of the kids there had two roses. So I bring that to you. If you could speak to the failure of heterosexual couples to have kept a standard in our country of something that is good and to aspire to as well. Can you speak to that better than I can?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the assault on marriage that culminated in Obergefell didn't happen overnight. It was a long, withering assault over decades that included no-fault divorce. And marriage used to be the sort of thing that we locked down with covenants and oaths before God and witnesses, and that people were expected to keep those covenants and oaths, and that there were very limited circumstances, usually involving things like adultery or abuse or great, major breaches of the covenant, that would lead you to a divorce, and divorce would be regarded as something. C.S. Lewis once said, you need to think of divorce like the removal of a limb, because this is one body. Like this is the covenantal union is one body, and so any attempt to sever it, even for great sins, should be regarded as a great tragedy. We then decided, no, let's just make it easy. Let's just make it, we have irreconcilable differences. We don't get along anymore. The fire's gone out. And so we're going to just end this. And we treated it like a contract. Like you used to work at, you worked at this company and you decided, I'm going to go work at a different company. And we began to sort of treat it very lightly. And once heterosexuals began to treat marriage lightly, it's no surprise that the rest of the culture said, well, if it's just a contract between two consenting adults and it has no formative influence on society, it's not tied down with covenants and oaths anymore, then why can't we extend that same kind of quote unquote right to others in whatever arrangements they want to have? So whether it's multiple people as in polygamy, or whether it's homosexuality, a family is whatever you want it to be. And so marriage was weakened by rampant divorce culture and the changing of the laws in that regard long before it ever became this the Obergefell decision and the attempts to redefine it completely.
Perfect. I got about a minute. What do you say to the argument, love is love?
No, God is love. That's what I would say. So God is love. And that means that God defines what love is, not that love defines who God is. So what love is attempting to do is elevate a false God. It's tempting to say, it doesn't matter who you love. It doesn't matter what God has said about love. What matters is your desires. And so your desires are now in the driver's seat. And therefore, you can do whatever you want, love whoever you want. And the truth is that no, when it comes to sexual love, God has said and specified where these desires, these very potent desires, are meant to go and what they're for. And they're meant to be a source of joy and pleasure in a marriage union. But it's also the only relationship that gives birth to children and is designed for a stable place to rear children. And there's tons of studies on this. It was common sense generations ago, and now we need social scientific studies to demonstrate that children thrive. Children have a natural right to their mother and their father, and they do best when they are raised by a mother and a father for the course of their lives, not in all of these other arrangements that we're trying to use as surrogate alternatives to marriage. Children do best in that environment, and we ought to stand up for the rights of children to have a mother and a father.
Perfect. Dr. Joe Rigney, Fellow of Theology, New St. Andrews College, pastor of Christ Church in Moscow, Idaho. You can go buy the book, The Sin of Envy. Dr. Rigney, great to talk to you, sir. Thank you very much. 2 points. It's called Pride. Oh, wild. Pride. They went with Pride. Pride Month just speaks to the transgression that is at the root of all of it. That we're going to embrace the worst sin, and pride is and boast in it. Pride is the root of every sin, right? Satan is the ultimate embodiment of pride. All right, so that the gays would use pride as their rallying cry for the movement. It's pretty wild. Satan thought that he was greater than God. And there's people of the world today that think they're greater than God just the same. They can make the rules. And who are you to say? In Dante's Inferno, which is not the Bible, but it's a beautiful work of art and of poetry, there's no specific place in hell for pride, but it is very clear throughout the book that it is the root of every sin. It is the root of greed and envy and worst of all, betrayal. But happy Pride Month. Then the second thing is the rainbow. Their pride flag was the rainbow. They went with the rainbow. Genesis 9:14, when I bring clouds over the earth and the bow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant that is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And the water shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant. We need to reclaim the rainbow and just know that the gays perverted it on purpose. They knew what they were doing. Gilbert Baker, he's the guy who made the pride flag. Now, we got a picture of the guy. I just want you to, it's important to know that, that guy made it. A real guy made it. He did it. We just think, oh, it's always been. No, that guy made it. And we don't have to accept it. Now, if you happen to see one, like I did with my kids, and Dr. Joe Rigney was talking about this, what we're supposed to do, or what they want us to do, is talk about how these people were oppressed and now they're not, and everyone is. Love is love. And I was like, no. And for me, my kids are young, 2, 4, 6, 8, so I can still do this now. I think this is age appropriate. When they see a pride flag somewhere, and if they ask what it is, I say, oh, that's the symbol of God's promise between him and people that he'll never flood the earth again and I could kill everyone, and God loves us. It's like, oh, great. Because that's what the rainbow is. That's what it actually is. I'm not going to tell them the gays' story about the rainbow. I'm going to tell my kids God's story about the rainbow and what it really means. And if they want pride, I'm going to keep the rainbow. But if they want pride, they can have it. Right? We want to kill the pride that's inside of us. Jonathan Edwards called pride God's most stubborn enemy. He said pride is the way that the devil enters the heart, even of the most zealous Christians. He called it the chief inlet of smoke from the bottomless pit to darken the mind and mislead the judgment. That's what pride is. They can have it. They can have pride, but they're not going to take the rainbow. Now, if I may, to make the point that this isn't exclusively about homosexuality, but all sexual sin. This is Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg is one of the front runners to be, sorry, I couldn't help but chuckle, to be the Democratic nominee for president in this upcoming election, which would just be spectacular. So here's Pete Buttigieg talking about how to bring more men into the party.
Of course, we should be talking about how, if Speaker Johnson got his way, it wouldn't be possible, not just for gay people to get married, but for straight people to get divorced, let alone like birth control or how he would want to regulate porn or whatever most people would have a problem with. But
so Buttigieg is trying to get more men into the Democratic Party by lifting up gay marriage and porn and divorce. Okay, that's what they want to do. I think we need to do the opposite. I would like to suggest how far I'm willing to go and how far I think we need to go. Now, not everyone's on the bandwagon completely yet, and that's fine. But I'll be honest, I missed being fully against gay marriage. I missed that bandwagon 15 years ago when it came around. I missed it. And I feel terrible about it, honestly, that I was so wrong in that debate. I used to make the libertarian argument that it should be up to the states. And if two people want to engage in any contract, then they should be free to do that, blah, blah, blah. That was my argument. Libertarian argument like 12, 15 years ago. I made it in Tennessee and I just got rebuked for it. And I was like, no, I stood strong. Man, I was wrong. I'd like to apologize. I've done it many, many times. I've apologized. I was very wrong. I missed that bandwagon. I missed the truth. And I'm not going to miss it on this one. Mike Lee from Utah has introduced, he calls the Interstate Obscenity Definition Act. And it redefines the word obscenity. We have the definition up here on the screen. But the point is, the intent is to ban extreme pornography. Pornography today is not your dad's Playboy, right? It is insanely graphic and horrific and violent. And kids are just a couple clicks away from it. Adults are too, of course. Why do we allow this? What are we doing to ourselves? Who says that this needs to be allowed? Oh, freedom. Yeah, okay. Freedom. Freedom for what? Freedom for what? Freedom's not the end of the story. Freedom is not the point. Freedom is the beginning. I first heard this about 2 years ago. Changed everything for me. Freedom is not the end of the story. Freedom is the beginning. Our founding fathers knew that it was the freedom. They wanted to give you the freedom or recognize that God gave you the freedom to do what you ought to do. And I believe it is in society's best interest to sit down and think, what behavior will most create human flourishing for our families, our towns, and our country? And someone will say, oh, but we have freedom. Right? You see how libertarians did that? Like, oh, you have freedom to do whatever you want. No, it's freedom to do whatever you ought, whatever is good, whatever you should do. Back in the day in America, like in our founding fathers era, there were laws. They're called sumptuary laws. They were laws that banned wasteful spending. You weren't even allowed to waste your own money. And you say, oh, but freedom. Okay, well, now you have the freedom to go broke and Americans are $1.2 trillion in credit card debt. So hooray for freedom. We used to have Sabbath laws, right? There were state laws that said you have to go to church on Sunday. Virginia had a law that said you had to go to church twice on Sunday. Laws that say stores can't be open on Sunday. No one's allowed to work, right? Respecting the Sabbath. And you say, oh, it separates church and state. Nonsense. They're the ones who passed these laws, our founding fathers. In America, adultery was outlawed. Think about this. Again, gay people today are like, oh, it should be legal to be gay. Like, okay, whatever. But do you know, not too long ago, adultery, cheating on your spouse was against the law. It still technically is in some states, just obviously not enforced. These are not libertarian ideas. But I believe, I know I have been the victim of conservatives, and I think many conservatives have embraced libertarianism too much over the last few decades. And it's led us to where we are today, and it is time that we rethink all of that again. We've had in our history laws against things that are bad for you. And maybe that's the point of people in a country, to come together and decide what is bad for us. What is bad for us as a society? Oh, these things are. Okay, let's ban them. Because isn't that the point? Is freedom the point? If freedom is the point, then fine. Everyone can do whatever they want. We'll see how it goes. But that's not the point. Freedom's not the point. Freedom's the beginning of the story. The point is human flourishing. That's what our founding fathers knew. And if they would look at something like pornography or cheating on spouses or drugs, they'd be like, some freedom you guys have. That's not what we were going for here. It is wise for us to put up guardrails to make what's best for a society of people. It's not freedom for its own sake. Virtue is the goal. And schools and churches and even government should be doing what they can do to promote virtue. Pride Month. Oh my. Pride Month. Sin disguised as a virtue, masquerading as righteousness. We need to reject it outright in everything we do, everywhere we see it, and instead promote real, true biblical virtue. Slater Radio on Twitter and Instagram. I have a podcast called Politics by Faith, where we take the news of the day, we do this pretty much every day, and we run it through a biblical filter. So if you think that will give you peace and perspective, that will be helpful for your life and lead to flourishing in your life and mind and heart more, then please join us over there on our podcast, Politics by Faith, wherever you listen to podcasts. Mike Slater, First TV, spread the word.